Hello and welcome to the webinar. The topic is modernisation of ECM, and specifically we're looking at the project at the Department for Business Innovation and Skills. My name is Jeff Knott. I lead Alfresco's activities into the public sector for both UK and Ireland. This is the second webinar in a programme that we are running in conjunction with our platinum partner Zaizi. And the next event is the seminar that's taking place at the BIS Conference Centre on the 3rd of December. Digital Dedication, Transformation Takes Commitment. You can see the URL, or you can find the event if you would like to attend on both the Zaizi and the Alfresco websites. Just a few words, if I may, about Alfresco. We're well known as the only open source ECM vendor in Gartner's Magic Quadrant. And as of the most recent Forrester Wave report, which came out just a couple of weeks ago, I'm very pleased to say that we've moved up into the leaders section in the Wave. There's three very distinct reasons I think that Forrester have put us in this position. One is the interoperability you get with Alfresco. Any of your content that you're managing Alfresco is accessible through open standards, open APIs to other software products. The second one is that Alfresco, being a much lighter weight, I guess you could say fourth generation ECM, it's got tremendous capacity to help those organizations that are currently burdened down with the old style of ECM products. And the final one is the embedded workflow BPM tool that we call Activity, which is incorporated inside the Alfresco product. This is significant because it helps a lot of organizations to improve the efficiency, and as part of the move around doing more with less, this is really important. Now, Alfresco is being used by a number of UK public sector organisations for modernisation of their enterprise content management systems. But that modernisation is only part of a much bigger picture where both Alfresco technology and Zaizi, with their expertise and services, are helping organisations to transform the way in which they're looking at information. And it's all part of this overall digital by default agenda. There's some graphics I'm showing at the moment which are from IDC and other industry analysts. And these really are the drivers that I certainly am regularly seeing in the discussions that I have with the public sector organisations I'm working with. People want to work in different ways now. It's not only about having more intuitive software, people that can embrace methodologies, whether it's on social networking or sites with very good search capabilities, such as you might find with Amazon, for example. But it's also down to the fact that we are now demanding to work with a variety of different devices. No longer are we chained to the desktop. We now have laptops, we have smartphones, and a number of us also benefit from using tablet devices. And these are a very real way in which people can become more efficient. It's also the case now that a lot of organisations are working with people outside their own enterprise. This has been the case in government for quite some time, but the extension of how you do that from a technical point of view actually has been quite difficult. Alfresco definitely helps in this area, and Carlos can explain more of that in a little while. And then finally, just come back to the other two graphics on IDC. People can benefit from the use of cloud infrastructure now, whether it's public cloud as represented by the 13% number, or information that really does have to sit behind the firewall, but nonetheless can benefit from, say, a private cloud. And Alfresco addresses this as well. And it's all very important because there has been an enormous explosion in the volumes, in the quantities of information that's being held digitally. IDC's prediction, as you can see, that between 2010 and 2020, it's going to be 50 times the volume that it was previously. And this is down to not only an increase in the standards, the Office formats, whether it's a Word document, Excel, the open source equivalents. Online forms are more prevalent now, but it's also in the proliferation of things like audio and video becoming more important for organizations. So specifically, the way in which Alfresco is providing a modern ECM to our customers really follows this mantra that we give the users access to the content on any device, through any application, and anywhere, whether you're in the office or on the move or working remotely. What I'm representing here in the green rectangle at the bottom is the Alfresco repository. You can see that that's wrapped around by a larger rectangle indicating that if you want the additional capabilities and security of records management, that all comes by default on any of the content that you're managing. And that content, you should just be aware, is any file format. There's no restriction with Alfresco on the file types that we can manage. And once those files are under the management and control of Alfresco, there's no restriction in the way in which you can access that. So what I mean by that is that Alfresco is based on strong use of APIs and open standards. So in addition to Alfresco's own user interface, which you can access both through desktop or through mobile devices or through our hybrid cloud instance, you can also access your own content through a variety of other software products. Productivity applications such as Microsoft Office or Google Docs as an example. You can access that content if you're a person that lives your life inside email, for example. And then finally, the use of open standards, open APIs means that there are a range of line of business applications from which you can also access that content. So the value here is that as part of that modernization, you're not necessarily having to enforce a user to learn a new and different interface. They can stay in the application that they use most of the time, email as an example, or perhaps Google Docs as another example, and find their information within inside Alfresco, knowing that what's presented back to them is the right version and is the version that they're allowed to see. And the final point here around open standards, Alfresco, its intent is to make sure that we assure the integrity of all of this information we're managing for you. But we do so in a way that, as I said earlier on, using our sort of fourth generation technology removes a lot of those encumbrances that it had in the past. So for example, Alfresco is completely browser based. So if your device is able to access the internet with a browser, then you can get access to your content with Alfresco. That's just been a quick little insight into Alfresco. Happy to take more questions at the end. But what I'd like to do is to get into the heart of the topic of this webinar and hand you over to Carlos from Zaizi. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. During the next 15 minutes, I'll be talking about a specific project and focusing on the communications and change management of that project. But before we start, a little background is required. As head of delivery at Zaizi, I have been involved in this project from the outset as Zaizi's overall project manager. I have over 20 years' experience in the field of enterprise content management and have spoken at various conferences about user adoption and records management. Our government organisation, the Department for Business Innovation and Skills, who we'll call BIS for short, is a department which currently has in the region of 4,000 people. Their role is to work with higher education to ensure students have the skills they need in the global employment market and to support industry and business to innovate and compete effectively anywhere in the world. They're a key department for driving economic growth for the UK. Like every government department, they generate a lot of information. Most of it is in unstructured content form, currently running at about 2 million new content items a year. Until 2013, BIS had a legacy EDRMS, which was on-premise and run by their main IT supplier. As the contract for the IT supplier was terminating, it was decided to replace the aging EDRMS system with a more modern system. The old system had been well adopted by some groups, but was not well used across the whole department. There were several reasons for this: an old-style user interface which was difficult to use, a slow search facility, and most importantly, the senior management did not use the system, as there was no mobile access to the system through their mobile devices. At the time, these were Blackberries. Based on their existing system and changes that were happening in IT, BIS formed their requirements for the new system. In addition to the requirements for mobile support and a more modern user interface presented through a browser, was sought to help aid adoption and to provide a more engaging user experience. The system also had to provide additional features for collaboration, both internally and externally, and this functionality was the subject of a previous webinar that we did that you can find the recording of on our website at zaizi.com. The environment at BIS is very much knowledge-centric, and there's a lot of collaboration happening. Most of the time this has been accomplished through meetings and emails, although some use was being made of Yammer. The department is also at the centre of what is known as the BIS family, and interacts with other agencies and bodies such as UKTI, the Land Registry, UK Space Agency, Companies House, and about another 40 others. As with all projects, there was an undercurrent of cost savings required, and a system was offered through the cloud using software as a service that was appreciably less expensive than the previous system. Although this all sounds very easy, the department faced a number of challenges in implementing this system. Firstly, there were some practical challenges to migrating away from the old system, not least of which was the migration of legacy records, of which there were 12 million. These were migrated on a like-for-like basis and included such things as permissions and all metadata. This was intended to make the transition to the new system easier for the users. However, in practice, it meant that the migration took much longer than anticipated. This in turn means that the times for the whole program were impacted, and consideration needs to be given to adjusting the communications, as we'll talk about shortly. At the same time, the whole IT platform in the department was changing. This meant moving from desktops to laptops, Windows XP to Windows 7, Office 2010 to Office 2013, all under a new service provision model that also required migrating shared drives and email inboxes. From a purely system perspective, there was a challenge to get everybody to use the new system, including the senior management team, and training 4,000 users across a number of geographically dispersed offices. Because the migration and implementation took longer than expected, there was the additional challenge of keeping people engaged during the process, and this is what we'll focus on for the rest of the webinar. First, let's look at how the governance and team structure was established for the project. The governance of the project was led by the Operations Committee within BIS, which decided overall program objectives and would make decisions on the training and rollout approaches based on recommendations from the Agile teams. The importance of the Operation Committee cannot be overemphasized. They were supportive and enthusiastic about the program from the beginning and were visionary enough to see how improvements in working could be achieved. The project as a whole fell under the auspices of the department's Program Management and Coordination SIAM team. Within the Agile delivery team, the major person driving the implementation was the senior responsible owner, who, working together with a number of product owners in the business, determined the requirements for the system, the protocols for its use, and as we're discussing here, the required change management and communication. Although the program did not have a change manager per se, the change management and communication processes were successfully addressed at the regular project boards. An existing group within BIS was the Ways of Working team, who are tasked with providing suggestions on the best way of adopting new technology and how BIS might change the way they work through the adoption of the technology. On this project, they acted in an advisory capacity, but were one of the early adopters of the system themselves, providing feedback to the operations committee. Within BIS, the Knowledge and Information Management Team, or KIM for short, are the product owners for such a system and the custodian of records. As such, they played a primary role in the implementation. For the change management and communications, the KIM team took everything into consideration and then, working with the communications team, devised a strategy for implementing the required changes and communicating those changes to the business. Initially, at project inception, Zaizi did some demonstrations to the operations committee and other senior users, and afterwards we started working and training the KIM team. The KIM team identified people who would be responsible for training and for evangelizing the project and product through the organization. As the KIM team gained experience and knowledge, they gradually increased their level of responsibility, and within 6 months were able to answer all the queries coming through from users, develop their own training materials, protocols, and communications. The KIM team became instrumental in ensuring user adoption. They were well aware of limitations of the previous system, and the business was keen to engage with them to discover what the new system could provide. User adoption itself has two opposing themes: the organizational versus the individual. The organizational requirement is for adoption to address organizational goals, such as efficiency and compliance. However, the individual is a person, and people are motivated by things other than the organization's requirements. But in the end, people make up the organization, so you need to ensure that you pander to the individual to be able to meet the organizational goals. Users are people, and people like simplicity. The system needs to make it easy to do the right thing. To this end, we made the user interface simpler in a number of areas. For example, we made it easier to declare records in the system for both users and records management administrators. People learn by watching others, so the KIM team looked for early adopters and addressing the requirements of those early adopters individually. For example, the legal team had a specific use case for a wiki, which they already had in another system, but which they wanted to port across to the new system to increase adoption. The KIM team took this on board and arranged for the wiki to be migrated so that the legal team could adopt early. People also want to be part of a group and participate, so we made sure that we carried out a lot of demonstrations and events to encourage a group feeling around the product. And through the use of videos, taglines, and other communication devices, we encouraged participation. Although there were some aspects that made this an easier process at BIS, for example, they already had good practices around document management, and many users were already familiar with the document management system, a full-scale change in communications effort was still required. Getting and keeping user engagement is not an event but a process and has to continue throughout the project's life. Leading from the front, the KIM team and their parent, ITD, adopted the solution first, using the system to store information about the project itself. A rolling marketing approach was used with lots of regular communication planned throughout the project's timeline, with different types of channels, email, intranet, posters and videos kicking in as the project progressed. Initially, we started with high-level demonstrations to different groups and teams. These allowed early identification of those individuals in the organization who would later become product champions. Early on, we developed a very high-level video selling the benefits of the new system. This was kept deliberately short and distributed as widely as possible. This could perhaps be best equated with a teaser trailer in the movies. As the project progressed, the communications and events could become more detailed and specific about features, use, and rollout. All staff events were used to give people background on the project, the timelines, how it would impact their work, and the input required from individual teams. Later, drop-in showcases were used. These not only showcase the product in more detail, but also the training and support available to the business from the Agile teams. Next, training sessions were scheduled for product champions. By videoing these sessions, missing people could be catered for, and the videos could also be used to recap and refresh. Getting ready for rollout events were held as the rollout approached, and once the rollout started, there were drop-in clinics held every day, as well as floor walking. Some specialist events were also scheduled. For example, a search with a sandwich session is held over lunchtimes to provide additional information on advanced searching. As the new system could now return thousands of records in seconds, it helps to be able to understand how to restrict the searches. In addition to these overall events and tasks, a constant stream of communication was put in place using email, newsletters, and the intranet. So what did we learn as part of this process that you can apply in your own projects? To get user adoption, you have to overcome the friction which builds up as you climb the adoption curve. To do this, we used some psychological factors, focusing on what users respond to rather than what the organization necessarily needs. The pace of communication needs to match the speed of the rollout, and you need to consider slowing it down if the pace of the project decreases, as we had to because of the migration taking longer than expected. There's a temptation to stop the flow of communications when things are not going well, but it's important to remember to keep the communications going even when timescales slip or there are problems. The notion of no news is good news is not apt in this case. You should look for small but easy wins like our legal wiki. A good number of small wins gained you support from the user community and can be a valuable fillip to the project. In the end, dedication to the project and its goals pays dividends if you stay the course, no matter how hard it seems at the time. Ultimately, for this program, the benefits as originally envisaged are being recognised. The mobile access is undergoing review as the mobile platform is changing, but the external collaboration is in place and being opened up for use. The take-up has been good, and the system allows much better searching than previously. For example, searches across the whole range of 12 million records now take in the region of 5 to 45 seconds depending on the number of results returned, whereas previously you could not perform this type of search at all. But of course, this does mean that people need to be better able to use the search. The reaction to Alfresco has been overwhelmingly positive, as has the reaction to all the communications and transformational changes. The pace had to be throttled to match the rollout. There were times when people were very keen to get started, but the system was not available for them. And this was frustrating for both the users and the team, but it was worthwhile in the end. Thank you for listening today. I hope you've gained some useful information from the session and it will help you to make your project successful. We are holding a live event in early December that will cover the program, challenges and the ultimate success in much more detail, and you can see our website for that.